really annoying and make it hard for us to focus. So once again, it's a skill, and if you keep going at it, hopefully you'll find that it becomes both less annoying and more easy to concentrate. One other person said about a third of the way in, I started to feel, or started to frequent yawning and felt slightly heady towards the end. And the pain in my back was distracting. So if we consider the first bit, the sense of yawning, it's really, really frequent for people to start to do this. It can be because the breathing technique is so different from the way you're breathing at rest now that you start to almost like you need more oxygen. And we know that yawning sometimes can be an indication that you're getting less oxygen than normal. And this sometimes happens when people start to do breathing techniques that are good, is they start to yawn. But the other thing about yawning is yawning sometimes is a stress reaction. And if the pain has caused your automatic systems to work in a way so your breathing is quite abnormal, and then you start to try to bring it back to a normal, that will actually in itself be somewhat of a stress to your system. And so the possibility is the yawning may be happening because of stress. And once again, we believe that if you can keep on going with it, then in time that's going to resolve. The feeling of being heady, so some people would would probably call the same thing spacey, or even like you're fuzzy or a little bit dizzy. This is another thing that can be due to the changes in the chemistry when you're breathing. If you're so used to breathing shallowly and then you start to breathe in a more calm manner, what can happen is you change the amount of oxygen in your blood and carbon dioxide in your blood, and these can then create these sensations of feeling dizzy or heady. So if you're finding that, what you probably want to do is just slow down on the technique, or maybe not do the technique as long. Other people feel spacey, just feel because the technique can almost make you feel like your body is light. And sometimes what people do is they, while they're doing the breathing technique, they try to have their attention focused both on the breath awareness but also on the feeling of their body on the floor. So for some people, if while you're doing a breath awareness or breathing practice, if you can divide your attention so that you feel your feet on the floor and your body on the chair, so divide your attention between that and the breathing technique, sometimes that will make you feel less sort of spacey or airy. And then the last comment here about the pain in the back being distracting, that's so true, and that's exactly what we're trying to almost fight against or challenge here is how do I keep on drawing my attention back away from the pain and onto what I want, and that's the practice that you want to get better at. We also got this comment, I never really noticed the subtle nuances that Neil was pointing out until he mentioned them all, the texture, sound, length, movement, spaces, pain effects. There's more going on in the simple stuff than we give thought to. And I guess it's a lesson in presence and awareness. And that's part of the breath awareness practice, is to start to realize, yes, that there is so much more going on. Because a lot of times people find that they can't just focus on their breath. But then when you start to pay attention to sound and feeling of the breath moving and feeling of your body moving and all these different aspects of your breath, it gives you enough to do that you can actually pay attention to it better. And that's often what we need to do at first is when we're under a lot of stress and a lot of pain, if we're only asked to pay attention to one little thing, it's a lot harder than if there's a lot of different aspects of the breath to pay attention to. We also had this comment, breathing and being aware of my breath allows my body to relax. I could feel the tightest parts of my shoulders relaxing little by little. And this, of course, is, as I mentioned, this is what we're hoping will happen. And if you feel even the smallest bit of relaxation or more sense of softness in your body or peacefulness, that's what we're trying to go for. And you usually get it a little bit at a time. And as time goes on with practice, you'll get more and more. So we'll leave it at that for the comments that we got. And Tanya, I guess we want to open up to comments from people who are online now.
Yes. So there are a couple in here based on people commenting on their experience. There There was one who commented that my experience is was really varied by whether I was full from a meal or too close to bedtime, etc. This morning was a good time. All experience is calming and relaxing, and it helps them to find a meditation time in the week, hopefully as a habit.
Right. Yeah, and that's what we want to do, is find a habit. But the food, the eating, traditionally when we do breathing practices or when we do yoga practices, the direction was, or the guidance was, to not do it within 1 to 2 hours after eating. And that this would make a little bit of sense, because you're trying to calm down your physiology and take control of your physiology, and while you're digesting food, your body's going to be putting a lot of energy into that. And then the other thing is, if there's enough food in your belly, then it's going to make it harder for your diaphragm. Your diaphragm's going to, when you contract your diaphragm to breathe in, you're going to be pushing your diaphragm against a full stomach, and that's just will create, I guess, a greater demand, and could cause some discomfort in some people to be trying to do breathing exercises against a full stomach.
That makes sense. And to tie into that, there was another comment. Sorry, I lost it there for a second. My pain is abdominal and quite frequently worse on inhalation, so this was harder to do at times.
Right. That's a really great question, and it's something that I've seen a few times. That, typically, the instruction that we give people around breathing is to breathe abdominally, or to feel the sense that as they breathe in, their belly is expanding, and as they breathe out, it's relaxing back in again. If the pain is abdominal, one of the options that we have is to try to take the focus of the movement of breathing up into our rib cage. Now, the rib cage doesn't move that much, but one of the things that person with that comment could try is, as you breathe in, try to feel like your ribs expand out towards the sides of your body. And rather than trying to really get your belly to move in and out, see if you can expand your rib cage. So that would be the sides of your ribs and the ribs up even into your chest. While you do that, you want to try to feel that your collarbones aren't rising. So your chest is expanding, but you don't feel this big collarbones pulling up towards your chin kind of thing. But I'd say give that a try and see how that works.
Very good. And then there was another one that someone commented when they learned Qigong. Qigong. I actually searched out loud places to practice so that I knew when my pain was at its worst I could concentrate over it. And for some of this might work also, but also might take some time. Oh
yeah, and that last bit is exactly the point, right? So whenever we're learning something new, we want to try to learn it in the least stressful, calmest place. And so we learn how to do it there, and then we want to start to add stressors in. So it could be movements, or it could be thoughts, or it could be sound, anything that would agitate our system. And so what this person's saying is, what they've done is they've learned a technique, and then they started to go where there was something bothering, something loud, something bothering them more. And then as time went on, they were able to sort of master the technique in the face of stress. No, it's no different than if you want to teach someone how to shoot a basketball. You don't learn how to shoot a basketball in the middle of the final game of the system or season when there's 1 second left. We take that person out of all those stresses to a place where they can stand right underneath the hoop and shoot. And then in time we move them back, and then we get someone to stand in front of them, and then someone to try to stop them from shooting, and then we make them tired and then try to shoot. Sort of do that same thing. And that's exactly what we'd want to do with the techniques and the practices we're learning here. Is the idea of this breath awareness and the breath control and the body awareness is to learn them in the most comfortable, calm place, and then start to add movement in and add more movements and more stress, so that you can start to use these techniques through your life, because they don't necessarily invade all of our life. Right? You may find that if you practice breath awareness, you may notice that you're actually doing some calm breathing at other times in the day, like it's just something that your body starts to do. But chances are, if you don't practice it under stress, you won't get better at it doing under stress. You'll just get better at doing it when you're calm.
That's very good.
There's another one from a few different people who are hoping that you haven't answered that already. They said who are having, because of their pain, they have trouble sitting still and are wondering if you've got any recommendations for how else they might go about it. Should they lie down? Should they be moving? Any suggestions on that?
Yeah, so no, we haven't got to that answering that yet, but that's a really, really good point. Is what I would suggest to everyone is to be in the best position of comfort first. So if laying down on your back or on your side or on your belly or laying in a recliner, if in your bed, if that's where the place where you can get your pain the least, then I would say do it in that position first. And then what you want to do is, as time goes on, try to pick, say, another position that's not really horrible, but something that's a little bit more bothersome, and sort of move along that way. The other thing is in terms of time. You may find that if it's you say, oh, I can sit for a couple minutes, well then I would say, well, do the practice for that couple of minutes, and then what we'd hope is that by doing the practice it would calm the system so you can actually stay still longer. But that really takes a lot of time to do, a lot of practice to get those changes to happen.
There's a question about whether there's a correct ratio for breathing in versus breathing out. Do you double the time, or your thoughts on that?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say about that is if we're going to do that, that's a breath-controlled practice, whereas what we've been doing so far is more of a breathing awareness. So if you may be saying, okay, well, I was doing this breathing awareness and I was noticing that I breathe in, I don't know, half as long as it takes me to breathe out, or something like that. That would make a lot of sense to notice that kind of thing. We don't know what the very best ratio is. When we look at the science, there's science that suggests that, a lot of science that says that what we want to do to calm our systems down the most is to lengthen our exhale. And so we typically want our exhale to be at least the same length as our inhale is. So a 1-to-1 would be sort of the minimum in terms of relaxing. But beyond that, there's no science that says this is exactly the right way to do it.
I think maybe we should move on to the next section and go through a few of the submitted questions for questions about the breath awareness practice, because some of the questions that are being submitted now leak into that section a little bit. So. Okay.
All right. So the first question we had about the exercise says, does it matter what time this exercise is done? So this question also went into the does it matter in terms of before or after eating? And this person also said, Neil mentioned that one should not do this in your bed as your mind associates it with sleep. This makes sense, but I've just found that doing 20-minute breathing exercise in bed in the morning after I wake up seems to be the most helpful for getting the day started. I have not tried doing breathing exercise consistently during the day other than in yoga. So let's tackle the fact that this person was doing it in their bed first thing in the morning. They found it really helpful. I would say thank you so much for saying that. This is the kind of information that is so key, is that we have these general guidelines of it's probably not best to choose laying down in the bed in the position that you're going to sleep in to do these exercises. However, here's someone who says, well, I did that and it actually works wonderful for me. And I think that's we've got these generalities that we believe in, but then there are so many people who try those things and say, hey, that actually does work for me, so I don't follow the general rule. And that's what a lot of us have to try. What I would say is that one different thing about this is that the person's doing it first thing in the morning when the whole body is ready to wake up, so the chemistry of your body is going to be less likely to be ready to go to sleep at that time. So the person asked about what time is the best time to do it. The tradition of yoga says the best time to do breathing and meditation is at dawn and at dusk. There's, in terms of the science, again, I can't tell you that that's been supported by science. I also can't tell you, I haven't read anything that says that's wrong. I just haven't read anything that says that that's right. I think for most of us what we want to do is practice it more than just first thing in the morning and last thing in the evening. If we're in a chronic pain state, we want to practice this more times than that. So, that at least 5 times a day. And yeah, I think that covers all of the points that were in that. But again, thank you to the person who posted that, because it's so key that I'm trying to give guidelines, because that's what we have. And sometimes you will find, the people who are listening here, you'll find that you do something that's sort of contrary to these guidelines, and if it works, it works. That's what we need to do. When we try to come up with a recipe for chronic pain management, it just doesn't work all that well.
There are a few questions specific to people who have trouble exhaling without coughing, or people who have trouble inhaling deeply without pain, and people wondering if you've got any tips about that.
Okay, so exhaling without coughing, I'm not sure how to address that. The question makes me wonder, does the person have a cold? Does the person have a respiratory condition like emphysema or bronchitis?
It is related to asthma.
To asthma, okay. Yeah, this is where I think what you need to do is you need to find someone who understands asthma and understands breathing practices for it to get very individualized attention. I don't think that there's any way specifically I can, I can't think of any great guidance I can give across a webinar. This is something I need to work with the person and see what their asthma is, how bad it is, and all those things to be able to figure out the right solution for that one. The other question was, no, I can't forget.
Inhaling deeply without pain.
Right. So what I would suggest is simple: is don't inhale deeply. Rather than focusing on deep breathing, what I would ask people to do is to think about making their breath last longer. So think about slowing down your breath so that when you breathe in and when you breathe out, it takes longer to do it, but you're not trying to turn your lungs into big bellows. So we nearly always hear people talking about deep breathing, and it's a fairly common thing that I've run into, where if we change the direction from deep to try to breathe longer and softer and smoother, this works better for a lot of people. So try that out. That would be the first step to try. If deep breathing is bothering you, slow it down and try to make it last longer and make it smoother.
There's a question about tightening and relaxing muscles in conjunction with breathing control, and this person heard it's a good way to extend range of motion and flexibility. Your thoughts on whether that works with yoga or not? This person finds that a lot of their pain is triggered by tense muscles.
Right. And actually, once we get around to the third of the webinars, sort of the third of the videos, it's specifically about releasing body tension. It's about becoming more aware of sensations in your body. And in that, you will be going through a practice of ever so gently engaging or contracting your muscles and then letting go. When we have chronic pain, we have so many times where the muscles just hold on for dear life because they go into protection mode. And sometimes it's been happening so much that we can't even feel it anymore. So when we can have the person gently engage them and then let go, it sort of helps to first learn where you're tense, but also helps to learn how to let go better. So we're going to talk a lot more about that after the third of the webinar videos, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Neil, you could probably continue on, with what's on the slides.
Okay. So we have this, how do you do this in public when pain spell starts? happens. So the breathing awareness exercise isn't specifically intended to make your pain less right away. I think we need to go to the pain control techniques or other techniques that are much more focused on both calming the system and on pain management or pain care. So you may find that breath awareness isn't of any value when the pain gets bad, especially if the pain's really bad. It's when the pain spikes to really severe levels, we probably want to get into other techniques besides breath awareness, because it's hard to calm your pain down with breath awareness. It works better when the pain is sort of that mild to moderate level. I should point out, though, that there are since I've gotten interested in this, I've talked to a lot of athletes and asked athletes, so when you are stressed, right, when you're about to compete, what do you do? And some of them, what they do when the stress gets bad right before a competition, which for all of you listening, if you have stress, that could make the pain get worse. So what they often do with the stress right before competition is just to stop and pay attention to the feeling of breathing. And that they found, some people have found that with practice, this lets all of the other stuff, all the other chatter, and all the other stresses release some, so that they feel less stressed, and therefore, if they were in pain, they would feel hopefully less pain at the time. So whether you can do this in public is going to, I mean, it's much more difficult to do it there. To the question of how do you do this when you're in public, well, obviously you only can do this when it's safe, because if you're going to draw your attention inside you, you have to make sure that you're not going to cause any sort of accident or run into anyone or anything like that while you're doing it. But in terms of public, you'll probably find that in time you'll be able to divide your attention between what you're doing and a breath awareness, so that you actually can do this in public to decrease your pain some. But as I said, I think it's not going to be like the best breathing or the best pain relief. It's not what most people say. So the second one here is when I was breathing through my nose with my eyes closed, I felt some anxiety, almost like I was not getting enough air, but I was. Is fear and anxiety normal? So well, fear and anxiety are definitely big aspects of chronic pain conditions, and because the system is so wound up, any stress that you have can start to bring on those protective responses. This is once again, if anxiety is coming up while you're doing any of these techniques, it puts you into the group of people who likely need very individualized assessment and instruction into how to do this, because it may be that with your best efforts you're trying to follow the instructions, but it's possible that you're not, and that you might need the guidance of a physical therapist or a yoga therapist to guide you into how to do the breathing exercises better. But understand it is normal. A lot of people find that as they do it, do the breathing technique more, that as time passes it actually gets less. Other people need to get the assistance of some health professionals with this. The other one we got here is that sometimes I feel a tightness in my neck, chest, and somewhere between my belly and my pelvis. Does this mean that I am breathing with more intensity than I'm comfortable with? Once again, it's really hard to answer this question without watching this person breathe. It is possible. It's a common thing that for a lot of us, when we start to pay attention to our breath, we really start to take control of it without even trying, and there's a lot of tension. And you actually find in the next technique that we do in terms of the breathing, the breath control technique, there are aspects of it that are trying to get us to be able to become more aware of how much tension we have in our body when we breathe, and of course how to let it go. Now, if this person who wrote this, one other thing that we could do is say, well, let's go back and do it again. So do the breath awareness exercise again, and you tell me, does it feel like everything is really tight inside you when you do this? And that's often what we need to do. You know, the person doing the practice is having an experience, and they tell the instructor, well, this is what's going on, often the best thing is for the instructor to then go back and say, well, try it again, and let's sort of consider this more and see, maybe that is what's going on, or maybe it doesn't feel like that's what's going on at all. And so we can try to sort it out better that way. So as you can see with a lot of these things, there's no black and white answer. So I think it's time to go back to some questions from our audience.
Neil, there's one question asking, when you're doing this exercise, would there be any benefit from doing it in a warm and steam-filled environment? Have you heard anything about that?
Well, I haven't heard of anyone specifically doing breathing exercises in warm, steam-filled areas. We definitely know that in terms of the yoga world, there are people who love the hot yogas, the Bikram and Moksha yoga thing, practices where you actually turn up the heat and turn up the humidity. And there are also some respiratory conditions that are going to do much better in that environment. So could there be benefits? Yes, there definitely could. Would it benefit everyone? I'm guessing probably not. I think it would be very specific people. Once again, that's where the sort of individualized assessment would come in to be helpful.
I had one more. Oh, where did I just put it? Essentially, the person was saying that at the end of their practice, they noticed that their shoulders were slightly raised, almost in a tensing manner, but just they were raised more than they should have been relaxed down, and wondering how they can avoid that or help to notice that better, or...
Well, the helping to notice it better would be just do that. Start to pay more attention to it. So it may, so if a person's had this experience, the first thing that I would wonder is that happening all the time and they've never noticed before? It's a good chance that that's going on. Or it could be that the effort that they're putting into the practice at the beginning is more than they actually need. And pretty much any of the practices that we do, we have to find that right balance between effort and letting go, where we're putting enough effort in, but not so much that things are getting too tight. So just in terms of if you find that that's happening too, and it is a common thing that people find that there's a lot of tension across the top of their shoulders and their neck, one of the strategies that you can do is that as you breathe in, you try to feel like as you breathe in, almost like your sternum over top of your heart is lifting up a little bit, just gently. You're not trying to pull it up to the sky or anything. You just feel like your heart is lifting up as you breathe in. And then as you breathe out, you try to keep the sense of that being high at the same time as you let your shoulders sink down on either side of it. So you breathe in, and it's almost like the energy of your breath is coming straight up through the middle of your body, lifting up your chest and sternum, and then that you maintain that sort of sense of length. And as you breathe out, your shoulders just soften down on either side. And some people find that gets them much more in practice of letting their shoulders go when they do the breathing. So give that a try.
Neil, Jerry is just asking for some clarification that you just said the exercises should be done 4 to 5 times a day, and he just wants some clarification on the duration of each of the sessions.
Okay, great. So when we're doing any of the breathing exercises, I had to look through the scientific literature to try to find out, is there a sort of the best length of time? And there have been a couple studies that have shown that when you do rhythmic breathing practice, so this won't specifically relate to the breath awareness exercise, but once we get into the other practices where you're sort of doing some rhythmic movement and rhythmic breathing, that with those that you need to try to do them, you want to try to get to beyond 4 minutes. That when people were doing these rhythmic breathing practices, which just means sort of breathing out with a steady rhythm, that after about 4 minutes, people start to, their nervous system start to produce more serotonin. And serotonin would, they found it when they're looking at the spinal cord neurons, and serotonin is something that elevates mood, decreases stress. And so the best research that I can sort of find would say try to get past 4 minutes when you do it. Beyond that, There was some research around breathing exercise that said that after about 15 minutes of doing it, you're starting to get changes in your immune system. But we actually just don't know the right amount of time. Now, if any of you listening are saying to yourself, well, I can't do this for 4 minutes, I can't stay still that long, I can't focus that long, it's just not possible, then what I would say is the duration you should be doing is the duration that you feel that you can do now without any big side effects. So if you can do this for 40 seconds, and that's where you're starting, start there and just keep doing it, and in time you'll be able to do it longer and longer and longer. And then if we look at the full duration, we say, well, if chronic pain is a nervous system issue, we're trying to make changes in the nervous system, we have to think, like, how much does it take? How much do we have to, how much time do we have to spend every day to try to get our nervous system to change? And once again, we don't know. But if you think of, if you wanted to get better at playing ping pong or throwing darts, or if you wanted to learn a new language, how long would you have to practice every day to get the best benefits? We sort of have to look there. Once again, we don't have the exact number, but we know that it's more than 2 or 3 minutes a day. We know that most people, when they start to get some really good benefits from practices that change the nervous system, that they're probably working up in the past 30 minutes, up into the 60 or maybe even 90 minutes a day in the end with everything that they're doing. And once again, if that number is freaking you out, hearing, oh my God, spend an hour to an hour and a half every day, if you can't do that, then do what you can, because although the research doesn't support it, when we talk to people who are practicing this, they'll typically say, anything is better than nothing. So, so to get to try to make it black and white, I would suggest try 5 times a day for a minimum of 5 minutes at a time. And if you can do it longer, that would probably be better for you. But that would be as best of a guess of a guideline I can come up with.
There's a question about spasticity, and this is from somebody with MS, wondering if a practice like this can reduce the spasticity as well as reducing the pain, and if you've heard anything about that.
So yes, I have heard, and it's from other yoga. This is from the experiences of students in classes of other yoga teachers or yoga therapists. So I have some colleagues who teach yoga for people with MS, and they would say that yes, breathing awareness and breath control exercises, primarily because of the fact that they are decreasing stress, so they're calming down the fight-flight system, that's could be a big benefit for people with spasticity, whether it's from MS or from a stroke or cerebral palsy. These are problems that are quite different than the muscle tension that the rest of us have. This is where the nervous system itself isn't monitoring and controlling muscle tension properly at all. So I don't know that you can actually change the damage. Well, actually, I believe you can't change the damage that's happened to the nervous system in MS, but you certainly can affect spasticity through calming down the sympathetic nervous system in the fight-flight responses.
Very good. I think we should probably move on to the next section because we are getting a little bit close to the time.
Oh, we are too. Okay, so safety in yoga, and we'll have time to cover these kinds of questions more as we continue to go on, and they'll really relate to the last of the webinars. So the question is, how much pain should I tolerate while doing some specific yoga moves? I'm wondering about the costs and benefits, just seeking some clarification about pushing myself, or perhaps not. Just some general guidelines would be great. I know you cannot be specific anyway. Well, with this, we will be a little bit more specific, and we'll get into it in the last of the webinars. But for now, if you are trying to do some of the physical postures of yoga, or actually if you're trying Tai Chi or Qigong or any of the exercises that you normally do, what I would say is the question here about the costs and benefits, probably the key thing to think of first is if you're doing this amount of exercise and have an increase in pain, do you regret having done it? If you're regretting having done that much activity, then it's probably you're saying that the consequences are outweighing the benefits. So you may say when you finish the activity, yeah, there's more pain, but I know this is okay because when I do this, I get to spend time with my family, or when I do this, I know I can keep my muscles strong. But yes, there's an increase in pain, and I believe that the benefit of that, the benefit of doing the exercise is greater than the consequence. And that's where I'd say is start with that as an idea. We're going to get more specific of this as we go on, but it's really, really key. If you regret doing it all the time, then chances are you're pushing too far. So another one we had was I have pain in a number of areas. I guess I go by listening to limits my body reminds me of. I was interested to think of pushing past those limits to extend my body, to extend what my body considers acceptable. Practicing only at home, should I get some help defining what is acceptable to push past? So for the person who asked this question, just go back to exactly what I just said about the benefits and consequences. For the vast majority of us, what we absolutely need to do is find the way to start to push our limits. We really, really believe that in chronic pain, the pain is no longer telling you the right time to stop. It's telling you to stop before you need to, based on the physical health of your body in most cases. So, but we don't want to recklessly go on and say, okay, well, if the pain's not, if the pain's not an accurate indication of what's going on in my body, I don't need to listen to it, because when people try that strategy, it doesn't work either. So part of what we're doing here is saying, okay, enough people have told us that when they can go back and reconnect with how their breath feels and how their body feels and try to calm their breath down and use those techniques while they're moving, they can actually start to move forward better. So enough people have talked about that. That's what we want to try to do with this series of webinars is, start with focusing on the breath awareness, and then next week will be breath control, and then the following week body awareness and body tension control, and then using all those things with movement. And what I've really found, and a lot of other people have found, is that by doing this, it allows us to push past those limits mindfully, not recklessly. So as I said, we'll get more into that as we go along. So this one is, how do I know when it's too much going into the pain? How do I find the balance between pushing, letting go, and too much for my slipped discs? So the first part of this all relates back to what we were just talking about, related to these other comments, except I want to point out for the last point here, the slip discs, is the wording slip discs, and I'm not sure if the person who wrote this understood, but there's this idea that discs can slip is just they can't. Discs are firmly attached in there to their spine. I mean, if a surgeon goes in and he wants to take a disc out, well, he doesn't go in and just pull it out. It takes him at least an hour to cut the thing out. These discs don't slip around. Discs do seem to get sore, and they definitely do bulge, but they do not slip. And the problem is if in your mind there's this idea that there's this thing slipping around inside you, that's going to create a sense of danger and a sense of fragility, and your nervous systems are going to be affected in a bad way by that. So if you've been led to believe that you have slipped discs, I would highly recommend that you get yourself to a physical therapist who can explain to you exactly what's going on there. I mean, there's lots of other healthcare professionals you can go see, but physical therapists are probably the ones that talk about this the most and easiest to get into. If you have an orthopedic surgeon handy, he can tell you too. As per the first webinar, do same cautions for osteoporosis apply to degenerative disc concerns? Well, degenerative discs, this is another tough one. It's a little bit like slip discs. I said every one of us, as we get older, our discs actually change. There's wear and tear that happens to our discs just like everything else in our body. And there's this thing called degenerative disc disease that's we all know now that actually degenerative disc disease isn't a degenerative condition really at all. It's not really a disease. It's a natural process of wear and tear. But the radiologists of the world continue to look at x-rays, and CT scans and MRIs and say, okay, there's degenerative disc disease, or there's, the discs are degenerative. But really what they know is that this is typically normal. Now, there are some people in the world who have a very specific degenerative disc disease, but that's not the majority of us. So if you've gone to the doctor and the doctor said, you have degenerative disc problems, and the doctor sort of seems to have not made a big deal about it, then chances are you've got this general wear and tear that's happened in your spine. And the joke sort of is that we don't call the wrinkles on my face degenerative skin disease, and we don't call the gray silver hair I've got on my head degenerative hair disease. So we probably shouldn't be calling changes that happen in discs over time degenerative disc disease either. So in terms of what do you do about it, the chances are you do not need to have very many precautions, but once again, you really need to find the person who can tell you, and the person, whether it's a doctor or a physical therapist, it needs to be the person who both understands you, your condition, and can assess you, and who understands what's going on in yoga. It's one of the troubles we have around yoga teachers. The yoga teachers may not understand discs all that well, so they may not be able to inform you really well. And then from the other side, if they don't understand yoga, it's hard for them to tell you what you should and shouldn't do within the yoga class. So that brings us back to more questions.
Neil, there's two so far in this one, and one of them is something that we touched on in the last webinar. But in relation to safety, could you talk a bit about the different kinds of yoga? This person's asking about something called yoga nidra and wondering about safety in relation to people who have pain.
Okay. Well, yoga nidra, is actually yoga sleep would be the strict translation of it. It's actually it's a type of yoga meditation. So it's the meditative heart of yoga. And there are now classes and courses. The big one in the States that's really excellent is called I Rest, like a little I then rest. And those are excellent trainings in the meditative heart of yoga. So in terms of our physical body, there shouldn't be a whole lot of risk concerns or safety concerns around doing meditation, unless you're trying to meditate in some unusual position, or possibly if you have, there would be some psychiatric conditions that you'd want to take care of around meditation, and I'm guessing that there probably would be some blood pressure issues that you might want to take care of. But for the most hand, the meditation side would be a more safe aspect of yoga. In terms of the other styles of yoga, I don't think it's so much the style of yoga that has to do with the safety as the experience of the teacher and the teacher's ability to get people to do what their body is ready to do and not to compete. We come into a yoga class, whatever style it is, and we compete. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background here. Anyway, we tend to compete, and so what we want to try to do is find a teacher who gets the class not to compete with themselves too much, not to compete with other people in the room, and that's probably the way to get the biggest safety, really, I think, is it's what the teacher is demonstrating and what the teacher is saying. Yeah, that's the way I'd go with it.
Wondering if you've encountered much with yoga and scoliosis. What this person is wondering about, they have rods installed in their back and are wondering, can you do the yoga movements when you've got limited yoga and limited movement in the spine?
This would definitely be one of the cases where I'd say you really need to get a good assessment by someone who can see, where you're limited, know where the rods are, how long they are, where they're positioned, all that. I think that's really, really important to get the right safety if you're going to be going into a yoga class and challenging yourself. If you're going to go to a restorative yoga practice where you are being propped up in these nice, comfortable positions, you probably don't need to worry about it with this. There is a lot of anecdotal evidence that people who have scoliosis and pain find that practices like yoga lead to way less pain. There's not a lot of evidence that it fixes scoliosis, although some people feel like when they do this, they get taller. They start to feel like they are straighter afterwards, but we don't have the scientific evidence to show that that's happening. Just a lot of people with scoliosis and pain saying that when they start doing yoga that they get better. So I'd say it's a great technique to use, but you really need to have individualized instruction and care for something like that. I should add one other thing is I don't want you to get the idea that I think that you're going to fall apart and break yourself really easily. If you have scoliosis or any of these other conditions. So we want to be careful that we don't get too afraid, but at the same point we want to take good care. So you're likely not going to fall apart doing the yoga practices because our bodies tend to be pretty solid. We just need to be careful and not cause more troubles with yoga.
Neil, maybe one more on the yoga styles, and then if we want to just touch a little bit on the research. I know there's not as many of those questions, but I do have one more. Someone asked what a gentle style of yoga is for a first-time beginner.
Oh, well, typically you'd want to look for yogas, things like usually beginners yoga in Kundalini would be physically gentle. Restorative yoga, Hatha, people often see Hatha, which is H-A-T-H-A, which just really actually is more to do with gentle yoga. Anusara as well would be gentle. I think the ones that I don't see as much gentle beginner work in would be Ashtanga, Power. A lot of the flow yogas aren't. Some of them are, though. I don't think Bikram's has any gentle beginners. I think the beginners is fairly strenuous. Hopefully that helps answer that question. There's so many styles, it's so hard to be able to answer it all. But if we move on to, there were some questions about research-related questions. I know we don't have a whole lot of time left. But there was one asking, has there been any research associating yoga helping with complex, so CRPS is complex regional pain syndrome, and there is, I have not seen anybody try to do any research on this. I haven't seen any meditation research with people with complex regional pain syndrome. This is a condition that has been primarily been treated with sort of intense medical interventions, although as time goes on we're starting to get some research, especially the stuff by Lorimer Moseley, showing that there are self-management practices that people can do to help with some aspects of CRPS, but it's not yoga that he's suggesting to do. It's hopefully if you have CRPS, you've found a physical therapist who knows the work of Lorimer Moseley and David Butler, and hopefully has picked up their new book, the Graded Motor Imagery book, because it provides a lot of instruction in how you can use these techniques for the horribly severe pain and troubles of complex regional pain syndrome. Now we only have a couple minutes left, so we go for any other questions.
I was going to say I don't actually see any research-related questions. There was someone who was asking, to repeat what book that was for the CRPS.
Oh, it's Graded Motor Imagery, and it's a book that you can only get from. The website is www.n as in Neil, OI group, so NOIGROUP.com.
Okay, and I can also I'll post that on our blog post as well,
so it's
so people can access it.
It's a book that's primarily for practitioners. But definitely people, what I've found is people who have complex regional pain syndrome become experts because they keep on running into healthcare people who haven't had a lot of experience with it. So often the book would be good for them as well.
Have you come across any research to do with post-surgical pain and yoga? And breath awareness?
Oh, actually, post-surgical pain and breath awareness, no. And I've only seen one good study on post-knee replacement pain and meditation, and it was very, very much in favor. The group that's added the meditation practice into their post-op, I can't remember all the things that they measured now, but there was a definite better improvement in the people who are using sort of meditation and breath practices after total knee replacement, which would make a whole lot of sense because we know that those practices decrease inflammation, and after the trauma of a joint replacement there would be a lot of inflammation.
And have you come across any research to do with breath awareness and chronic fatigue syndrome?
No. And I'm trying to think of, there is research around yoga and chronic fatigue. I'll have a look to see if I can find anything on breathing, breath control practices or meditation practices, but very, very few people have looked at actual breath awareness practices. They've looked at the breathing control or meditation, but I'll look into that and see if I can find anything before the next webinar. So I see the time's pretty much up. I just wanted to add one other thing, is this last slide here. I've jokingly told people that there are 4 P's of success when you're trying to work at pain care and managing pain through self-management. And it's sort of a joke because they're not really all 4 P's. But we need to practice. We need to do it over and over again. We need to be patient because these changes don't usually happen very quickly. We need to persist, and we need to find a way to have compassion to ourselves, because we tend to beat ourselves up a lot when we don't succeed really quickly. The little picture that you see on here is a picture of some rocks that were balanced on a fairly windy day on the rocks down in Stanley Park in Vancouver, and I watched this guy lifting these up. The bottom of those rocks would have been about 3 feet tall. And so as I walked up, I saw this guy. He had the 2 on the outside done, but he was working on the middle one. We watched him sort of drag the one rock up and then put that sort of oval rock up on top of it. And it took him 45 minutes where he'd stand and he'd sort of think that he had it and they'd move away until he finally got those rocks to balance. And it's definitely a show of if we stick with it long enough, sometimes we get to be able to do things that you never expect. I mean, if you looked at those rocks, you'd never expect it to be able to stand up on their own, let alone on a day that was windy. And that's sort of where we have to do, is try not to let our expectations that this pain is so bad and it's been there so long that we won't be able to change it at all. We need to try to let some of that go and stick with it and see what we can do in the end. So I'm hoping you will be able to stick with it and work on the other practice, and we'll talk more next week.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Neil, for the presentation and for answering all of our questions so well. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Later you will receive an email, later today I hope, with a link to the breath control video that'll be for practicing for this week. And then we will join together again next Friday at the same time at 11 a.m. Pacific on the 18th for discussing. We'll do the same format, so it'll be with those same questions. You can submit your questions where the videos are posted, as well as you can email me, or there will be a link in the email to a survey that you can fill out with some of your questions. And we will move forward just like this one did. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And we look forward to seeing you next week.